The chisel slipped from Diana Carter's trembling fingers, its sharp edge biting into the polished walnut as her breath caught in her throat. 10 figures stood motionless around her father's grave, their black cloaks rippling in the morning mist like shadows given form. The tool clattered to the cobblestone path, the sound unnaturally loud in the profound silence that had descended upon the ancient cemetery. Her heart hammered against her ribcage as she pressed her palm against the rough bark of the guardian oak, feeling the centuries-old tree's steady pulse beneath her skin. The workshop apron she wore, still dusted with wood shavings from her father's final restoration project, suddenly felt foreign against her body. These weren't mourners who had come to pay their respects. Their stillness held an otherworldly quality that made her skin prickle with recognition of something far beyond her understanding. The central figure stepped forward with fluid grace, his movements carrying the weight of countless years. When he lowered his hood, Diana's breath escaped in a soft gasp. His face possessed an aristocratic beauty that seemed carved from marble, with sharp cheekbones and pale skin that caught the dawn light like polished stone. But it was his eyes that held her captive, ruby-red depths that seemed to contain the wisdom and sorrow of ages. Diana Carter. His voice resonated with quiet authority, each syllable carrying the cadence of old nobility. I am Edward, and I have come not as an enemy, but to honor a debt long overdue. She wanted to step backward, to flee toward the familiar sanctuary of her father's workshop, but her legs remained rooted to the earth. The morning air seemed to thicken around them, charged with an energy that made the fine hairs on her arms stand on end. I don't understand, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the soft rustling of leaves. Edward's expression softened with something that might have been gentle regret. He extended his hand, palm upward, and Diana watched in stunned silence as a withered daffodil from her father's grave began to transform. The brown, brittle petals unfurled slowly, color bleeding back into them like watercolors on wet paper, until a perfect golden bloom rested in his palm. Life flowed backward through time at his touch, defying every natural law she had ever known. Your father was more than a craftsman, more than the quiet man who taught you to honor wood and tradition. Edward's gaze moved to the weathered headstone, and Diana followed his line of sight. Where before had been carved only her father's name and dates, new words now appeared in elegant script, guardian of the Sacred Pact. The letters seemed to shimmer with their own inner light, as if they had always been there, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. Diana's knees buckled slightly, and she gripped the oak tree harder. That wasn't there yesterday, she breathed, her voice cracking with disbelief. I cleaned that stone myself. I know every curve of every letter carved upon it. The truth reveals itself when the time is right, Edward said, his tone carrying infinite patience. Your father protected humanity from forces that would see it consumed by darkness. He was the last in a line of guardians stretching back 7 centuries, bound by an ancient covenant between our kinds. The other figures remained silent, but Diana could feel their attention focused upon her with an intensity that made her skin feel exposed. She pressed her back against the oak's trunk, drawing comfort from its solid presence. Our kinds? The words felt strange on her tongue, laden with implications she wasn't ready to comprehend. Edward nodded slowly, acknowledging her growing understanding. I am what your stories would call vampire, though that word carries shadows we have long sought to dispel. My people have walked alongside humanity for millennia, not as predators, but as protectors against threats far more terrible than legends suggest. Diana's mind reeled, trying to process revelations that shattered everything she thought she knew about the world. The morning light seemed different now, charged with possibilities that made her workshop and her quiet life feel suddenly small. My father never told me anything about this. He taught me about wood and craftsmanship, about preserving beauty for future generations, but never about Guardians carry their burdens in silence, Edward interrupted gently. Your father chose to spare you this knowledge until it became necessary. That necessity has now arrived. She could feel tears threatening at the corners of her eyes, grief and confusion warring within her chest. He's gone. Whatever he was supposed to do, whatever legacy he was meant to pass on, it died with him. No. Edward's voice carried such conviction that Diana found herself looking directly into those impossible ruby eyes. The heritage flows in your blood, Diana Carter. Your hands that breathe new life into ancient wood. Your heart that honors tradition and craftsmanship. These are not mere talents, but manifestations of a deeper calling. One of the other figures stepped forward, a woman whose face held the timeless quality of someone who had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. When she spoke, her voice carried the warmth of a mother's embrace. I am Carmen, keeper of ancient wisdom. Your father spoke of you often in our council meetings. He knew this day would come, and he prepared for it in ways you have yet to discover. Diana felt the world tilting around her, as if she stood at the edge of a precipice that would forever change the landscape of her existence. The familiar weight of her father's tools in her workshop, the scent of wood shavings and linseed oil, the quiet satisfaction of restoration work. All of it seemed to be slipping away like sand through her fingers. There is darkness stirring, Edward continued, his voice taking on an urgency that made Diana's pulse quicken. An order of mortals who seek to corrupt the ancient protections, to tear down the barriers between worlds and unleash chaos upon both our peoples. Without a guardian to maintain the sacred seals, their success becomes inevitable. Carmen moved closer, her presence radiating a maternal comfort that reminded Diana painfully of her own mother's gentle strength. Your father left you more than a workshop and cherished memories, child. Hidden within his most treasured creation lies the key to understanding your true inheritance. Diana's breath caught as she thought of her father's masterwork, the magnificent desk of dark mahogany that dominated his private study, its surface marked by decades of careful use. She had always known it was special, had felt drawn to its intricate carvings and hidden compartments, but had never suspected it might hold secrets beyond family history. The choice before you is profound, Edward said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. You can return to your workshop, continue your father's craft, and live the life he tried to preserve for you. Or you can accept the calling that flows in your veins, become what you were born to be, and help us protect both worlds from the darkness that approaches. The morning mist swirled around them, and Diana felt as if she stood suspended between two realities. In one direction lay the familiar path to her father's workshop, to the quiet life of restoration and craftsmanship she had always known. In the other stretched an unknown road filled with dangers and wonders she could barely imagine. She closed her eyes, feeling her father's presence in the whisper of wind through the oak leaves, in the solid earth beneath her feet, in the very grain of the wood tools that had shaped her hands. When she opened them again, Edward was watching her with an expression of profound respect, as if he already knew what her answer would be. If I say yes, Diana whispered, her voice growing stronger with each word, if I accept this legacy, what happens to the life I've built? To my father's workshop? To the work I love? Nothing of true value is ever lost, Carmen replied softly. The gifts that make you a master craftsman are the same gifts that will make you a guardian. Both require patience, skill, and the ability to see beyond surface appearances to the essential truth beneath. Diana felt something shift within her chest, a recognition that seemed to resonate in her very bones. The weight of her father's hidden sacrifices, the depth of love that had driven him to shield her from this burden until the very end, filled her with a mixture of grief and determination that surprised her with its intensity. She stepped away from the oak tree, her legs steady now despite the magnitude of what she was contemplating. The 10 figures watched her in respectful silence, and she understood that this moment would define not only her own fate, but the fate of countless others who would never know her name. "Show me," she said, her voice carrying a strength she hadn't known she possessed. "Show me what my father died protecting, and help me understand what I was born to become." Edward's smile held both sadness and hope, the expression of someone who had waited lifetimes for this precise moment of courage. "Then we begin with truth. Your father's desk holds more than memories, Diana Carter. Within its hidden heart lies the map to your destiny and the key to powers that have slumbered in your bloodline for a generation." With the weight of centuries now resting on her shoulders and the ancient promise echoing in her heart, Diana Carter stepped away from her father's grave, ready to discover the truth he had protected, a truth that now demanded her courage. The workshop felt different when Diana returned, as if the familiar space had been subtly transformed by the weight of revelation. Every shadow seemed deeper, every beam of sunlight more purposeful as it illuminated the tools her father had used for decades. The scent of wood shavings and linseed oil, once comforting as a mother's embrace, now carried undertones of mystery that made her hands tremble as she approached his private study. Edward moved through the workshop with careful reverence, his immortal eyes taking in the craftsmanship with genuine appreciation. "Your father's work was exceptional even by our standards," he murmured, running pale fingers along the grain of a half-finished table. "We have artisans among our kind who have perfected their craft over centuries, yet Robert's touch held something beyond mere skill." Carmen followed more slowly, her ancient wisdom evident in the way she paused at certain pieces, as if reading stories written in wood and metal. He channeled his guardian heritage into his craft. Every restoration was an act of protection, every repair a small victory against the forces of decay and entropy. Diana's breath caught as she stood before her father's desk, the magnificent piece of dark mahogany that had always seemed to pulse with its own quiet life. The intricate carvings she had admired since childhood now appeared different, their patterns suggesting meanings beyond mere decoration. Celtic knots intertwined with symbols she couldn't identify, while hidden among the decorative elements were shapes that seemed to shift when she wasn't looking directly at them. "The third panel from the left," Edward said softly, positioning himself beside her. "Press the carved rose while turning the corner flourish counterclockwise." Her fingers found the rose naturally, as if they had performed this action countless times before. The wood responded to her touch with a soft click, and a section of the desk's surface slid away to reveal a hidden compartment lined with midnight blue velvet. Within lay a tarnished silver key, its head carved with the same symbols that adorned the desk, and beside it, a map drawn on parchment so old it seemed to whisper with age. Diana lifted the key with reverent care, feeling its weight settle into her palm like a missing piece of herself. The metal grew warm against her skin, and for a moment, she could swear she felt her father's presence guiding her movements. "He knew I would find this," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "He prepared for this moment from the day you were born," Carmen confirmed, moving closer to examine the map. "This chart shows the way to the ancient pyramid city, where the heart of Shadowstone waits. Without that artifact, the seals that protect both our worlds will fail." The map was a work of art in itself, hand-drawn with meticulous care. Ancient symbols marked various locations, while delicate illustrations showed landmarks that seemed to shimmer with their own inner light. At the map's center, rendered in ink that appeared almost black, until the light caught it just right, stood a pyramid that seemed to pulse with hidden power. "The Order of the Perpetual Gloom has been searching for this location for decades," Edward explained, his voice taking on the hard edge of ancient conflict. "They are mortals who have glimpsed the supernatural world and seek to exploit its power for their own dark purposes. If they reach the heart of Shadowstone before us, they will corrupt it, turning humanity's greatest protection into its doom." Diana studied the map, her craftsman's eye noting the careful attention to detail, the way certain paths were marked with warning symbols while others bore signs of blessing. How far is this place? How much time do we have? The ancient pyramid city lies beneath the modern world, accessible through tunnels that have existed since before recorded history, Carmen replied. But the journey is treacherous, and our enemies grow bolder with each passing day. They have already begun moving toward the city, guided by fragments of knowledge stolen from guardians they corrupted or killed. The weight of responsibility settled around Diana's shoulders like a mantle of lead. Her father had carried this burden in silence, protecting her from knowledge that would have stolen her childhood and shadowed her youth. Now she understood the quiet strength she had always sensed in him, the way his eyes sometimes held depths of sorrow she couldn't fathom. "There's more," Edward said quietly, producing a letter sealed with wax that bore her father's mark. "He left this for you, to be opened only when you accepted your destiny." Diana's hand shook as she broke the seal, unfolding paper that seemed to carry the very essence of her father's presence. His familiar handwriting, careful and precise as his woodworking, filled the page with words that made her heart ache with love and loss. "My dearest Diana," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then the time I hoped would never come has arrived, and you must now walk the path I tried to spare you. You have always been stronger than you knew, more capable than you believed, and the blood that flows in your veins carries the power to stand against darkness itself. Trust in Edward and Carmen, for they have been my allies and friends longer than you have drawn breath. Trust in yourself, for you are the culmination of 7 centuries of guardian heritage, and your courage will light the way when all seems lost. Remember that every piece you have restored, every broken thing you have made whole, has been preparation for this moment. The heart of Shadowstone is not merely an artifact. It is the crystallized will of every guardian who came before, including my own father and grandfather. When you hold it, you hold the strength of our entire lineage. I love you beyond words, and though I cannot walk beside you on this journey, know that my spirit and the spirits of all our ancestors will guide your steps. Be brave, my daughter. The world needs you now." Tears blurred Diana's vision as she finished reading, the letter trembling in her grasp. The workshop around her seemed to echo with ghostly whispers of encouragement, as if the very walls remembered her father's presence and approved of what she must now become. "We should leave within the hour," Edward said gently, his voice carrying both urgency and compassion. "The longer we delay, the greater the risk that our enemies will reach their destination first." Diana nodded, carefully folding the letter and placing it close to her heart. She moved through the workshop gathering supplies, her hands automatically selecting tools that might prove useful: a small chisel for delicate work, a sturdy mallet, several lengths of strong rope. Carmen watched approvingly as Diana's instincts guided her choices. "You understand, without being told," the ancient woman observed. "The guardian's intuition already stirs within you." As they prepared to depart, Diana felt herself standing at the threshold between 2 worlds. The life she had known, filled with quiet satisfaction and honest craftwork, lay behind her in the familiar comfort of her father's workshop. Ahead stretched unknown dangers and wonders that would test every fiber of her being. Yet as she looked at Edward's noble face and Carmen's wise eyes, she felt a sense of rightness that surprised her. This was not a burden imposed upon her, but a calling that had been waiting patiently for her to recognize it. The journey to the ancient pyramid city began in twilight, when the boundary between day and night created pockets of shadow perfect for concealment. Edward led them through streets Diana had known since childhood, but now she saw them differently. Subtle signs marked buildings where guardians had once lived, while other structures bore the faint traces of supernatural influence. The ordinary world she thought she knew was layered with hidden depths and secret histories. They descended into the old sections of the city, where Roman foundations still supported medieval buildings, and beneath those, passages that predated human civilization entirely. The air grew cooler as they moved deeper, and Diana noticed that their path was lit by a soft phosphorescence that seemed to emanate from the tunnel walls themselves. "The earth remembers," Carmen explained, noting Diana's wonder. These passages were carved by the first guardians, blessed by rituals that have maintained their power across millennia. The light you see is not electric or flame, but the accumulated goodwill of those who have walked this path in service to others. The tunnels branched and twisted, following patterns that seemed random until Diana began to recognize the underlying logic. Like the grain in wood, the passages followed natural flows of energy and power. Her inherited instincts guided her steps, confirming turns before Edward indicated them, sensing dangers before they materialized. Hours passed in steady progress, the city far above forgotten as they moved through a realm where time seemed to flow differently. The phosphorescent glow grew stronger as they approached their destination, and Diana began to hear something that might have been music, a low, thrumming harmony that resonated in her bones. "The heart of Shadowstone calls to those with guardian blood," Edward said, noting her reaction. "You feel its presence because it recognizes you as its rightful bearer." They emerged into a vast cavern where ancient architecture rose from living rock. The pyramid stood before them, its surfaces covered in carvings that seemed to move in the ethereal light. Diana gasped at its beauty, understanding instinctively that this was not merely a building but a living symbol of the covenant between worlds. "Magnificent, isn't it?" The voice came from behind them, cold and mocking. Diana spun to see figures emerging from the shadows, men and women dressed in dark robes, their faces twisted by years of pursuing forbidden knowledge. "We've been waiting for you to lead us here," the guardian's daughter, so obligingly following in her father's footsteps. Edward stepped protectively in front of Diana, his form seeming to expand with menace. "The Order of the Perpetual Gloom. I should have sensed your corruption sooner." The leader of the cultists, a gaunt man whose eyes held the feverish gleam of obsession, smiled coldly. "You, immortals, always underestimate mortal determination. We've been tracking you since you revealed yourselves at the cemetery. Did you truly think we would allow another guardian to claim the heart?" Carmen moved to Diana's other side, her elderly form radiating power that made the air shimmer. "You have no understanding of what you seek to claim. The heart of Shadowstone will destroy any who touch it without the proper bloodline." "Then it's fortunate we have the Guardian's daughter to retrieve it for us," the cultist replied. "She will take the artifact, and we will take it from her. Simple and efficient." Diana felt fear clawing at her chest, but beneath it stirred something deeper. A righteous anger that her father's legacy should be threatened by those who understood nothing of sacrifice or service. The tools in her pack seemed to grow heavier, reminding her that she was not helpless, that her hands had learned strength through years of careful work. "I won't let you corrupt what my father died protecting," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The cultist's smile widened. "You have no choice, girl. We outnumber you, and we've prepared for every contingency. Your immortal friends are impressive, but they cannot stand against the weapons we've brought." Several of the robed figures produced devices that hummed with unnatural energy, clearly designed to harm supernatural beings. Diana realized with growing horror that the Order had been preparing for this confrontation far longer than anyone had suspected. Edward and Carmen exchanged glances, communicating in the silent language of ancient allies. "Diana," Edward said quietly, "can you reach the pyramid's entrance? The heart lies within the central chamber." She nodded, understanding that they were buying her time with their own safety. "What about you?" "We'll hold them as long as we can. Carmen replied. But you must succeed quickly. If the heart falls into their hands, all our struggles will be for nothing. Diana ran toward the pyramid as battle erupted behind her. The entrance responded to her approach, ancient mechanisms recognizing her guardian heritage and opening passages that had been sealed for centuries. She could hear the sounds of conflict echoing from the cavern, spurring her forward despite the terror that threatened to overwhelm her. The pyramid's interior was a maze of corridors lined with hieroglyphs that seemed to tell the story of her lineage. She saw guardians from across the centuries, each facing their own trials, each making the choice to sacrifice personal happiness for the greater good. Her father's image appeared among them, young and determined, accepting his destiny with the same mixture of fear and resolve she felt now. At the pyramid's heart lay a chamber of impossible beauty. The heart of Shadowstone rested on a pedestal of pure crystal, its obsidian surface reflecting light that shouldn't exist. The artifact was larger than she had expected. Roughly the size of a human heart, its surface smooth as glass yet somehow warm to the touch. As her fingers closed around it, Diana felt the accumulated strength of every guardian who had ever lived flow through her, filling her with power and purpose beyond anything she had imagined. But even as triumph filled her heart, she heard footsteps in the corridor behind her. The cultists had broken through Edward and Carmen's defense, and now they came for what they believed was rightfully theirs. Diana clutched the heart to her chest, feeling its power pulse in rhythm with her own heartbeat, and realized that her greatest test was yet to come. The artifact's obsidian surface grew warm against her skin, and she felt something awakening within her. Not just the guardian heritage her father had passed down, but something uniquely her own. The same instincts that had guided her hands in restoration work now showed her the path forward, revealing secrets hidden within the pyramid's ancient design. As the cultists entered the chamber, their leader's eyes fixed greedily on the heart of Shadowstone, Diana made a choice that would echo through eternity. Instead of fleeing, she stepped forward to meet them, the artifact's power flowing through her like liquid fire, transforming her from a frightened young woman into something far more formidable. The battle for humanity's future was about to begin, and Diana Carter, guardian and craftsman, daughter of protectors and heir to ancient power, stood ready to face whatever darkness threatened the world she had sworn to defend. As the sacred heart of Shadowstone pulsed in her grasp and the echoes of their pursuers faded into the ancient earth, the true challenge of destiny awaited them beneath the heart of the great city, where the fate of worlds would soon be decided. The sacred chamber beneath the grand city temple thrummed with ancient power as Diana descended the final steps, the heart of Shadowstone warm against her chest. Edward and Carmen flanked her, both bearing the marks of their desperate flight from the pyramid. Carmen's robes torn but her eyes bright with purpose, Edward's aristocratic features set in lines of grim determination. The escape had been harrowing, a race through collapsing tunnels as the Order's weapons had destabilized the ancient foundations, but they had emerged victorious, the artifact safe in guardian hands once more. The underground sanctuary revealed itself in breathtaking splendor as phosphorescent symbols awakened along the walls, responding to the heart's presence. Carved reliefs depicted the first covenant between vampire and guardian, showing figures joining hands beneath stellar configurations that had guided humanity's protectors for 7 centuries. Diana felt her father's presence strongly here, as if his spirit had been waiting in this sacred space for her arrival. "The ritual circle has been prepared for generations," Carmen said softly, gesturing toward the chamber's center where intricate patterns had been carved directly into the living rock. Silver inlay traced geometric forms that hurt Diana's eyes to follow, their complexity suggesting meanings beyond mortal comprehension. "Your father helped design these modifications, incorporating elements that would respond specifically to your bloodline's unique gifts." Edward moved to his position at the circle's eastern point, his ruby eyes reflecting the growing illumination. Around the chamber's perimeter, the remaining Immortal Council members took their places. Lady Elena, with her silver hair gleaming like starlight. Elder Marcus, whose scarred hands spoke of battles fought across millennia. Young Guardian Thomas, whose enthusiasm masked centuries of accumulated wisdom. Each carried the weight of their individual histories, yet all focused their ancient power toward this single moment of renewal. Diana approached the circle's heart, where a shallow depression waited to receive the heart of Shadowstone. The artifact pulsed against her palms, its obsidian surface warm as living flesh, and she could feel the accumulated will of every guardian who had ever lived flowing through its crystalline depths. Her father's voice seemed to whisper guidance, reminding her of lessons learned in his workshop about patience, precision, and the importance of honoring traditions while adapting to present needs. "The words will come to you," Carmen assured her, taking her place at the circle's northern point. "The ancient tongue flows in your blood as surely as your guardian heritage. Trust in what you feel, not what you think you should know." Diana knelt within the circle, placing the heart of Shadowstone in its destined cradle. The moment it touched stone, the chamber transformed. Light erupted from every carved symbol, racing along the walls in cascading patterns that spoke of protection, renewal, and the eternal vigilance required to maintain the balance between worlds. The air itself seemed to crystallize with power, and Diana felt the weight of responsibility settling around her shoulders like a mantle woven from starlight. She placed her hands on either side of the artifact, feeling its surface pulse beneath her fingers. Words rose from the depths of her being, syllables she had never learned yet understood with perfect clarity. The ancient tongue flowed from her lips like water from a spring, each phrase resonating through the chamber with increasing power. "Ethon Veltar Nephis, Guardian Dal Morthun Kaleth," she intoned, the words seeming to reshape reality around them. "By blood and bone, by craft and calling, I renew the sacred bounds that hold darkness at bay." The heart of Shadowstone began to levitate, rising from its stone cradle as Diana's voice grew stronger. Energy flowed from her hands into the artifact, and she could see threads of power extending outward, connecting to anchor points scattered across the globe. These were the seals her father had died protecting, mystical barriers that prevented malevolent forces from breaching the boundaries between dimensions. Edward's voice joined hers, his centuries of accumulated knowledge lending strength to the ritual. "Morthun Veleth Guardian, Nephis Daleth Keening." One by one, the other immortals added their voices, creating a harmony that seemed to reach beyond the physical world into realms where concepts like time and space held different meanings. Diana felt her consciousness expanding, touching the network of protections that surrounded humanity like a vast web of silver light. She could sense weak points where the Order's corruption had begun to take hold, feel the malevolent pressure of entities that waited beyond the dimensional barriers for any opportunity to break through. The responsibility was overwhelming, yet she also felt the support of countless predecessors, their strength flowing through her bloodline to sustain her efforts. The chamber's walls began to pulse in rhythm with the heart of Shadowstone, ancient stones remembering their purpose after decades of dormancy. Symbols carved by the first guardians blazed with renewed life, while newer additions, her father's contributions to the protective matrix, glowed with particular intensity. Diana understood that she was not merely renewing existing protections, but strengthening them, adding her own unique gifts to a legacy that stretched back to humanity's earliest days. Power flowed through her with increasing intensity, and for a moment, Diana feared she might be consumed by forces beyond her comprehension. But then she remembered her father's lessons about working with wood, how the craftsman must respect the material's natural properties while guiding it toward new purposes. She applied the same principle now, channeling the ritual's energy while maintaining her individual identity, becoming a conduit for power rather than its victim. "Keleth Morthun, Ethon Dal Nephis," The final words erupted from her throat with such force that the heart of Shadowstone blazed like a captured star. Energy cascaded outward in visible waves, racing along the carved channels in the chamber floor and walls before shooting up toward the city above. Diana could feel the power spreading, touching every seal, every barrier, every protection that stood between humanity and the darkness that hungered to devour it. The ritual reached its climax as the heart settled back into its cradle, now glowing with inner fire that would sustain the renewed protections for another generation. Diana collapsed forward, her hand still touching the artifact, as the chamber's intensity slowly faded to a warm, steady radiance. She had done it. The seals were renewed, the barriers strengthened, humanity's protectors given new power to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Edward was beside her instantly, his strong hands helping her to her feet. "You have exceeded every expectation," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "Your father would be proud beyond words." Carmen approached from the other side, her ancient eyes bright with unshed tears. "The network is stronger now than it has been in centuries. Your unique gifts have added new dimensions to our defenses, protections that the Order cannot corrupt or circumvent." Diana looked around the chamber, seeing how the symbols continued to pulse with renewed life, how the very air seemed cleaner and more vibrant. She had felt her father's presence throughout, the ritual, guiding her steps and lending his strength to hers. The grief that had shadowed her since his death was still present, but now it was balanced by a sense of purpose that filled the empty spaces in her heart. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice hoarse from the ancient incantations. Edward exchanged glances with the other immortals, a silent communication passing between them. When he looked back at Diana, his expression held both hope and gravity. "Now comes the choice your father hoped you would never have to make. The seals are renewed, but they require a guardian to maintain them. Someone with your bloodline, your gifts, your understanding of the delicate balance between worlds. You could return to your workshop," Carmen added gently. "Resume your life as a craftsman and heritage restorer. The protections will hold for decades without direct intervention, and perhaps by then, another guardian will emerge from your lineage." Diana felt the weight of decision settling around her. She could see both paths clearly, one leading back to the familiar comfort of her father's workshop, to the quiet satisfaction of restoration work and the peaceful rhythms of a craftsman's life. The other path stretched into unknown territories, filled with responsibilities that would reshape every aspect of her existence. She thought of her father, carrying this burden in solitude for decades, protecting her from knowledge that would have stolen her childhood innocence. She remembered his gentle hands guiding hers as she learned to work with wood, his patient voice explaining the importance of preserving beauty for future generations. Now she understood that those lessons had been preparation for this moment, when she would choose between personal happiness and a duty that transcended individual desires. "If I accept this calling," Diana said slowly, "what would that mean exactly? Would I become like you?" She looked at Edward, then at the other immortals arranged around the chamber. "The choice is yours," Edward replied. "You could remain mortal, serving as guardian for whatever years are granted to you, then passing the responsibility to another, or—" He paused, his ruby eyes holding depths of possibility. "You could accept the gift of immortality, joining our family in truth as well as purpose. The transformation would preserve not only your life, but enhance your abilities, allowing you to serve as protector for centuries to come." Diana felt her heart racing as she contemplated the implications. Immortality meant leaving behind every aspect of her human existence, friends who would age and die while she remained unchanged, a world that would transform around her while she endured. Yet it also meant the ability to truly honor her father's legacy, to stand as humanity's guardian for as long as the world needed protection. She closed her eyes, feeling the heart of Shadowstone's warmth against her consciousness, the network of protections that now carried her unique signature. In her mind, she could see her father's workshop, sunlight streaming through windows onto tools that had shaped her understanding of craft and dedication. But she could also see the broader world beyond those familiar walls, millions of people who would never know her name, never understand the forces that threatened them, never realize how close they had come to disaster. "My father gave his life to protect people who never knew he existed," Diana said, opening her eyes to meet Edward's gaze. "He chose duty over personal happiness, service over comfort. How can I do less?" A smile of profound respect crossed Edward's aristocratic features. "Then you accept?" "I accept." The words came without hesitation, carrying the weight of centuries. "I choose to become what I was born to be. I choose immortality, guardianship, and a place in your family of protectors." The chamber seemed to exhale around them, as if the ancient stones themselves approved of her decision. Edward stepped forward, his expression solemn yet filled with joy. "The transformation is not without cost. You will watch human friends grow old and die. You will see the world change in ways that sometimes prove heartbreaking. You will carry responsibilities that can never be fully shared or understood by those you protect. But you will also witness wonders that mortal eyes cannot see," Carmen added, her voice warm with welcome. "You will have the power to preserve not just artifacts and buildings, but the very essence of what makes humanity worthy of protection. Your craftsman's skills will evolve into abilities that can literally reshape reality, and your guardian heritage will grow stronger with each passing century." Diana nodded, understanding that she stood at the threshold of a transformation beyond anything she had imagined. Yet as she looked around the chamber, seeing the faces of immortals who had become her new family, she felt a sense of belonging that surprised her. This was not an ending, but a beginning. A chance to honor her father's memory while forging her own path as protector and preserver. Edward moved closer, his hands gentle as they cupped her face. "The gift is given through connection, through the sharing of our immortal essence. Are you ready?" Diana met his ruby gaze without flinching. "I'm ready." The kiss that followed was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Power flowed between them, ancient magic reshaping her mortality into something far more enduring. She felt her heartbeat slow and strengthen, felt her senses expanding to encompass frequencies of light and sound beyond human perception. The workshop skills she had learned from her father merged with new abilities, her craftsman's understanding of materials and structures extending to encompass the very fabric of reality. When the transformation was complete, Diana opened eyes that now held flecks of silver light. The chamber appeared different, layers of meaning visible in every carved symbol, currents of power flowing through the air like streams of liquid starlight. She was still herself, still Richard Carter's daughter, still the woman who had learned to love wood and tradition and the patient work of restoration. But she was also something more, a guardian in truth, immortal protector of the world she had sworn to defend. "Welcome to the family," Edward said softly, his voice carrying warmth that spoke of centuries of brotherhood and shared purpose. Carmen embraced her with maternal affection. "Your father's spirit can rest now, knowing his legacy continues in such capable hands." Diana felt tears on her cheeks, tears of grief for the mortal life she was leaving behind, tears of joy for the immortal purpose she was embracing. She would return to her father's workshop, but as something transformed. The quiet craft that had shaped her youth would continue, but now it would serve a greater purpose, each restored piece becoming a small victory against the forces of decay and entropy. 6 months later, Diana knelt beside her father's grave in the early morning light, her immortal hands gentle as she planted enchanted flowers that would bloom regardless of season. The workshop behind her thrived under her guidance, though visitors sometimes commented on the unusual quality of her restorations. Pieces that seemed to glow with inner life, furniture that felt blessed with protective properties they couldn't quite define. She had found her balance between worlds, serving as both craftsman and guardian, preserving beauty while protecting the innocent. The heart of Shadowstone rested safely in the temple chamber below, its power flowing through network of renewed seals, while above ground, Diana Carter continued her father's work with hands that now held the strength of eternity. The morning mist swirled around the ancient cemetery, carrying whispers of approval from guardians past and present. Diana touched the carved words on her father's headstone, guardian of the Sacred Pact, and felt his spirit's gentle embrace. She was no longer alone in her calling. She was part of an immortal family, heir to a legacy of protection that would endure as long as humanity needed defenders. Rising from the grave with fluid grace that spoke of her transformed nature, Diana Carter walked back toward her workshop, ready to face whatever challenges awaited. The world was vast and full of wonders and dangers, but she would meet them all with the same patient strength her father had taught her. One careful restoration, one gentle protection, one moment of grace at a time.